I'm going to do some meta-ethics today. I've set myself a challenge. I've got 10 minutes of space left on my phone, so that's all I can talk for. So I'm going to split meta-ethics into realism and anti-realism. So today we're doing moral realism. I'm just going to quickly talk about cognitivism and non-cognitivism first. So cognitivism states that moral judgments make claims about the world that are truth apt. They can be true or false. They express beliefs and they're making claims about the way the world is. So, for example, if I say the chair is red, then if you're a cognitivist, you believe that moral judgments make the same kind of claim. So murder is wrong, can be true or false, and it's something that expresses belief about the way the world is. Non-cognitivism is the idea that moral judgments are not truth apt. They can't be true or false. They don't express beliefs, they express something else. And they're not making claims about the way the world is. We will do non-cognitivism separately when we do anti-realism, but just to give you an example, if I was to put my hand in hot water and say, ow, then that's just a reaction. That's not true or false. It's not making a claim about the way the world is. It's just expressing something that's not a belief. It's just an emotional reaction. So that is to come another day. But for now, moral realism is the claim that there are mind-independent moral properties. So the rightness and wrongness of anything or any act exists independently of my mind, it's objective, and it doesn't depend on what I think. Mostly, cognitivists are also realists. Not always, and we will find out about error theory next time, but generally they are. So let's say that you're a realist and you believe there are mind-independent moral properties. You are then either a naturalist or a non-naturalist. If you are a naturalist, you believe that moral properties can be reduced to non-moral properties. So if I reduce something, I'm explaining what it really is. So I can reduce water to H2O, I can reduce lightning to electrical discharge. So if you are a hedonistic utilitarian, you believe that good is pleasure, bad is suffering. So I am reducing a moral property to a natural property. I can see that, I can sense it, I can experience it. There's no mystery about it. So if I look at an act and I see that it's causing more suffering than pleasure, then I can say that is a bad act, and a good act or a right act causes more pleasure than suffering. And I can see that and I can experience it through my five senses. The spec also wants you to use Aristotle's virtue ethics as an example of naturalism, because somebody's character, how they behave, their dispositions to be, say, compassionate, temperate, courageous, again, is something I can see. Now, what you've then got is you've got G.E. Moore, who is a realist and believes there are mind-independent moral properties, but disagrees with the fact or the claim that we can reduce them to natural properties. So for G.E. Moore, any attempt to define good is going to commit the naturalistic fallacy. So just to give you an example of something called the open question argument, which is on your specification. If I was to define good and give it a proper definition, I would be left with what's called a closed question. So let's say that I've got a proper definition of a sister. A sister is a female sibling. It doesn't make any sense to me to say, she is my sister, but is she my female sibling? That's a closed question. I don't need to ask that. That's not open for debate because a sister has been properly defined. And yet if I was to define good as pleasure, I'm not left with a closed question, I'm left with an open question. So it's a legitimate question for me to say, well, this causes me pleasure, but is it good? That's a legitimate debate. So, I can eat the family bag of M&Ms and I can say, oh, this causes me pleasure, but is it good? Now, if I properly defined good as pleasure, what I'd really be saying is, this is good, but is it good? But I'm not doing that, so I haven't properly defined it. And that's because for Moore, it resists any kind of moral property, resists reduction, it resists definition. So he says it's a bit like the colour yellow. So I can use yellow to describe other things. So if I used to say describe the flower and I say the flower is yellow, and then you say, okay, thanks, but can you describe yellow? I would say, no, I can't. Unless you've experienced it, I can't explain that to you. It's unanalysable. I can use it to describe and analyse other things, but it itself is resists definition, resists analysis. It's just has to be experienced. And good is like that. So he says, if somebody asks me to define good, I would say, well, good is good, and that's all there is to it. And I really like that. He's there with his pipe, and then he storms out in my head. That's what he does. It just can't be, it can't be defined. So what he's doing is he's suggesting that those moral properties are out there, but they can't be reduced to natural properties. And as such, they're not going to be detected through the usual five senses. So if you take the example of somebody committing a murder, let's say you see somebody committing a murder and you know it's wrong. For Moore, you do know it's wrong and you do sense it's wrong, but not in the usual way. It's not experienced in that way. So this is where you start talking about things like maybe some kind of sixth sense, maybe intuition. Now, Moore later denied he was an intuitionist. He just said, I'm not really telling you how you detect it, it's just not the usual way. But you will find often that he is associated with intuitionism, this idea that we have this other faculty for detecting these moral properties. So that's quite interesting as well. So you know it's wrong, but it's not something you smell, taste, hear, see, touch. It's something different. So let's consider something now called the is-ought gap, which is often used against any kind of realism, although actually Moore also believed it. So if you think about your AQA specification, it comes under arguments against moral realism. And it's something that Hume picked up on, an argument for why there are no objective mind-independent moral properties. He says what we do is we go around and we move from what is the case to what ought to be the case. And we do this all the time, and yet there's no logical reason for doing so. So we move from fact to value, and yet the value cannot be found in that fact. So let's say I see somebody kicking somebody else in the head because they don't like the way they're dressed. And he is causing him pain, fact. He ought not to do that, value. We make that move, but Hume says that gap cannot be closed rationally or logically. For him, it's an emotional move. It's a move we will make and we should make, but we shouldn't credit ourselves with thinking that's a rational move because it's not. So this gap can't be closed. And if you apply that to Mill and his greatest happiness principle, Mill said the only proof that something is desirable is that it's desired. We desire our happiness, fact. We ought to desire happiness, and in fact, we ought to desire the happiness of all, value. But that's a really good example of this is-ought gap. We go from what is the case to what ought to be the case. And Hume said if you take any act that we would call vicious, like willful murder, examine it as much as you like, you will never find within it anything that we call wrong, anything that we call bad. In actual fact, that's part of us. And, Hume goes on with this, and he actually says that moral judgments can't be factual things because facts don't motivate us. Morality motivates us. It makes us want to do things. But facts can't do that. Facts, if I believe the chair is red, that doesn't make me want to do anything. If I desire for it not to be red, then I might act. So just believing that something's the case is not enough to make us act. We have to desire for it to be or not be the case. So moral judgments have to be desires and not just beliefs about the way the world is, and not just facts. Okay, quickly as well, I'm just going to touch on Mackie. And what Mackie suggested was that he was an anti-realist. And he said, well, one of the arguments for that is relativity. So there is a great disparity in moral codes around the globe. So, for example, huge parts of the population or the global population believe in monogamy. Huge parts believe in polygamy. You can take other examples. Some people believe in eating meat. Some people believe that's morally wrong. Now, if there are objective moral facts, if realism is true, then huge parts of the globe are just wrong about these objective moral facts. But in which case, how can we explain that? Do their intuitions not work? Are they not able to detect what's going on here? These are not people who are just lazy. They believe they're doing the right thing. And for Mackie, it makes far more sense to suggest that there are no objective moral properties, not that huge parts of the globe can't detect them or are just wrong about them. And if there were these intuitive, non-natural properties, they'd be very, very weird, very queer, he calls them. It's the argument from queerness. What would they be like? How are they woven into the fabric of the world, and how do they motivate us to act? How do we detect them, if not through the senses? It's just very, very strange. And what Mackie suggests is that we mistake our reactions for properties in the actual world. So just because I'm disgusted by something doesn't mean that thing has the property of being disgusting. Just because I have a reaction to an act doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that act. So yeah, I'm going to have to stop there because I'm really running out of time on my phone, but I'm going to pick this up again. Hope it helps, and we will continue.